The Lost Cousins, a comprehensive portrait of the Neanderthal people. For centuries, the word Neanderthal was synonymous with savage brute, a dim-witted, knuckle-dragging ape-man destined to be swept away by the superior intellect of Homo sapiens. However, modern archaeological and genetic discoveries have dismantled this stereotype, revealing a complex, compassionate, and highly capable human species that lived, loved, and pioneered technology long before our own ancestors dominated the globe. The story of the Neanderthals is not one of failure, but of remarkable adaptation and a legacy that continues to live within the DNA of nearly every modern human today. Origins and discovery. The journey to understanding these ancient cousins began in the 19th century. The first Neanderthal remains were found in 1829 by Philippe Charles Schmerling, though they were initially mistaken for modern human fossils. It wasn't until 1856, when bones were found in the Neander Valley of Germany, that schoolteacher Johann Karl Fuhlrott and anthropologist Hermann Schaffhausen recognized them as a distinct form of human. Neanderthals evolved from a common ancestor shared with modern humans, likely Homo heidelbergensis, roughly 500,000 years ago. While our ancestors remained in Africa, the lineage that became Neanderthals moved into Europe and Asia, adapting to the harsh, fluctuating climates of the Ice Age. They eventually occupied a vast range from the British Isles to the Altai Mountains in Siberia, and as far south as the Levant. Anatomy of an Ice Age specialist. Neanderthals were built for survival in extreme cold. Physically, they were more robust and stocky than modern humans, featuring barrel-shaped rib cages, wider pelvises, and shorter limbs, proportions similar to modern Inuit populations, designed to conserve body heat. Males averaged about 5 feet 5 inches, 165 centimeters, and weighed roughly 171 pounds, 77.6 kilograms, possessing a powerful build that likely excelled at sprinting rather than the long-distance endurance seen in Homo sapiens. Perhaps most surprisingly, Neanderthals had larger brains than modern humans, averaging 1,600 cubic centimeters for males. While their brain structure differed, with more tissue devoted to vision and bodily maintenance, the sheer size of their cranium suggests significant cognitive capacity. Their faces were distinct, characterized by large noses to warm, cold air, a protruding brow ridge, and the absence of a pronounced chin. Genetic analysis even reveals that many Neanderthals, particularly in Europe, likely had pale skin and red hair, an evolutionary response to the low-light conditions of the north. The sophisticated hunter-gatherer long depicted as hyper-carnivores, Neanderthals were actually versatile foragers. While they were undoubtedly apex predators who used thrusting and throwing spears to hunt mammoths, woolly rhinos, and reindeer, their diet was surprisingly diverse. In coastal Spain and Italy, they dived for shellfish and harvested dolphins and seals. In forested regions, they gathered mushrooms, pine nuts, and moss. Neanderthals were masters of fire and cooking. They created hearths for warmth and used them to roast meat and boil bone marrow into nutrient-rich stews. Their technology, known as the Mousterian industry, involved the complex levallois technique, where stone flakes were precisely shaped into scrapers, knives, and spear points. They even engineered birch tar glue to haft stone points to wooden shafts, and evidence of cordage suggests they understood weaving and knots. Most impressively, some evidence suggests they may have been early seafarers, reaching Mediterranean islands like Crete and Sardinia over 100,000 years ago. Culture, compassion, and spirit. The most profound shift in our understanding of Neanderthals comes from their social behavior. They were not ruthless, they were deeply compassionate. This is best exemplified by Shanidar I, an individual who suffered debilitating injuries, including a withered arm, blindness in one eye, and deafness, yet lived into his 40s. He could not have survived without the lifelong care and food provided by his tribe. They also possessed a sense of the spiritual and the aesthetic. Neanderthals were likely the world's first artists, creating cave paintings in Spain, such as at Maltravieso Cave, 64,000 years ago, 20,000 years before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. They fashioned jewelry from eagle talons and seashells, used ochre for body paint, and constructed mysterious stone circles deep within caves. Crucially, they buried their dead. Discoveries at Shanidar Cave in Iraq show evidence of deliberate burials, some potentially accompanied by flowers or grave goods. This practice suggests a level of cultural development and respect for the deceased that was once thought to be unique to our species. The encounter and disappearance. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began migrating into Europe, and for several thousand years, the two species coexisted. This was not a period of pure conflict, but of interaction. We know now that the two groups interbred. Most modern humans outside of sub-Saharan Africa carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA, which has influenced our immune systems and skin types. However, by 30,000 to 39,000 years ago, the Neanderthals as a distinct species disappeared. Their extinction was likely a perfect storm of factors. Extreme climate shifts, such as Heinrich 4 events, may have depopulated their small, isolated bands. The arrival of larger, more socially connected groups of Homo sapiens led to competition for resources and assimilation. The Neanderthals were essentially bred out of existence by a more numerous population. Disease and potential violence may have also played roles, but the end result was the same. The light of the Neanderthals dimmed. Legacy. Though they are gone, Neanderthals are not truly extinct. They live on in us, in our genomes, and in the very history of what it means to be human. They were pioneers who mastered the cold, cared for the weak, and dared to paint their stories on the walls of the earth. By studying them, we do not just learn about an extinct species, we learn about a lost branch of our own family tree that was, in every meaningful way, just as human as we are. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. End of part 1. Close your eyes now and let the heavy curtain of the present day fall away, leaving only the soft, velvety dark of your own imagination. Breathe in deeply, feeling the air fill your lungs, cool, crisp, and smelling faintly of damp earth and crushed limestone. We are drifting back, not years, but centuries, floating on the river of time until we reach a quiet, verdant valley in Prussia. The year is 1856. Can you hear the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of pickaxes against stone? It is the sound of the Industrial Revolution hungry for resources. But here, in the steep gorge of the Dussel River, known as the Neanderthal, or Neander Valley, the workers are uncovering something far older than industry. The air here is thick with the dust of the Kleine Feldhofer Grotte, a small cave perched high on the limestone cliff face. It is August, and the light filtering through the canopy of beech and oak trees is dappled, dancing on the sweat of the quarrymen who are clearing out the sticky clay to reach the limestone beneath. They are not looking for history. They are looking for money, for stone to build the growing cities of Europe. But the earth has a way of keeping receipts. As they shovel the debris, a worker's spade hits something hard, not rock, but bone. He pauses, wiping his brow, perhaps thinking a cave bear had a very bad day here eons ago, for bear bones are common enough in these old hills. He tosses the fragments aside, a skull cap, heavy and thick, with brow ridges that arch like stone bridges over empty sockets, and a few curved limb bones. They almost tumble down the ravine into the rubbish heap, saved only by a moment of curiosity. This is where our story truly begins, in the hands of a local schoolteacher named Johann Karl Fuhlrott. Imagine him holding that skull cap, feeling its peculiar weight, running a thumb over the strange, sloping forehead. The popular belief of the time is that humans have remained unchanged since creation, yet this bone whispers a different truth. It is human, yes, but different. Ancient, rugged, built for a world of ice and mammoth. Fuhlrott, with the intuition of a detective, suspects this is no malformed modern man, nor a Cossack soldier from the Napoleonic Wars, as some skeptics would later amusingly suggest. Because apparently, riding horses gives you heavy eyebrows. No, Foolrot senses he is holding a lost chapter of our family album. He takes the bones to Hermann Schaffhausen, an anatomist, and together they ignite a firestorm that will burn through the scientific world. We stand there with them in the gaslight of a German study, watching the shadows lengthen across the table where the bones rest, silent witnesses to a forgotten time. The dust of the quarry settles, and the noise of the pickaxes fades, replaced by the hushed realization that we have never been alone. We have cousins. And as we drift away from that Victorian study, floating further back, deep into the mists of deep time, we leave the arguments of the 19th century behind to find the true beginning, long before the first stone was ever quarried. Parting ways in the deep past. The gaslight of the Victorian study flickers and dies, dissolved by the swirling mists of a time so deep it feels like the ocean floor, heavy and silent. We drift backward, past the rise of Rome, past the building of the pyramids, past the first farmers sowing wheat in the Fertile Crescent, until the numbers of the years fall away entirely, leaving us roughly 600,000 years in the past. The air here tastes different, richer, heavier with pollen and the raw green scent of a world that has not yet known the plow. We find ourselves standing on the sun-baked savannas of Africa, but also simultaneously at the gateways to the Levant and Europe, hovering over a pivotal moment in the story of life on Earth. It is here that we meet the family before the fracture, the common ancestors who hold the potential for both us and the Neanderthals within their blood. Scientists often call them Homo heidelbergensis, a robust, tall, and capable people who walk with an easy, long-legged stride across the grasslands. Look at them closely as they rest in the shade of an acacia tree. Their brows are heavy, their faces broad, and their eyes hold a spark of intelligence that feels startlingly familiar. They are the great-grandparents of humanity, the trunk of the tree before the branches split. This separation, this parting of ways, is not a dramatic event marked by arguments or borders drawn in the sand. It is a slow, quiet drift, as gentle as a log separating from the riverbank to float downstream. It happens over generations, driven by the restless rhythm of the climate and the eternal need for food. One group of these tall wanderers decides to stay, or perhaps their path simply loops them back into the warm, pulsing heart of Africa. These are the ones who will, over hundreds of thousands of years, refine their forms into the slender, high-foreheaded beings we call Homo sapiens. But another group, perhaps following the herds of migrating beasts or chasing the promise of greener valleys, turns their faces north. They walk out of Africa, crossing the land bridges that rise from the sea when the water is locked in ice, and they keep walking. They move into the untamed landscapes of Europe and Central Asia, a world that is beginning to cool, a world of deep forests and craggy mountains. There's a profound melancholy in watching this slow divergence, a silent goodbye that no one realizes is being said. They do not know that they are leaving their cousins behind forever. They only know that the deer are moving north, and so they must follow. It is the ultimate road trip, but without the convenience of GPS or rest stops, and certainly without the ability to ask for directions, which, let's be honest, is a trait that seems to have persisted in the male lineage of both species. As they venture deeper into this new territory, the isolation begins to sculpt them. The gene flow between the northern wanderers and the southern stay-at-homes slows to a trickle and then stops. This is the mechanism of evolution, isolation and pressure. The north is not the forgiving Eden of the south. It is a land of moods, of shifting glaciers and seasonal sharpness. To survive here, the wanderers must change. Their bodies begin to retain more heat, their bones thicken to withstand the rougher terrain. The Heidelberg mask begins to slip away, revealing the nascent face of the Neanderthal. Historians and geneticists still debate the precise moment of this divorce. Was it 500,000 years ago? 700,000? The molecular clock, tick-tocking away in our DNA, suggests the split was messy and prolonged, a fading signal rather than a clean cut. But the result is undeniable. We watch as the landscape around them transforms from the scrub of the Mediterranean to the dense, dark woodlands of Germany and France. The sun hangs lower in the sky here, casting long violet shadows that stretch across the valley floors. The nights are colder, demanding that they huddle closer together, sparking the beginnings of a social bond that is tighter, more intimate than the loose associations of the savannah. The silence of this prehistoric Europe is absolute, broken only by the wind sighing through prehistoric pines and the distant trumpet of an elephant ancestor. It is a world waiting to be named, waiting to be claimed. These early pioneers are not yet fully Neanderthal, but they are no longer just Heidelbergensis. They are becoming the people of the valley, the people of the north. We see a mother carrying her child across a rushing ice-fed stream, the water biting at her legs, and in her determination, we see the blueprint of the resilience that will define her descendants. She does not look back toward the warm south. Her eyes are fixed on the blue-white horizon of the glacier ahead. She is walking into the ice age, and she is taking the future of her species with her. The distance grows, not just in miles, but in biology. The two lineages, once one, are now like two ships sailing in opposite directions on a dark ocean, drifting so far apart that soon they will not even recognize each other's signal flares. The tragedy of this separation is soft, buried in the slow erosion of shared memory until they are strangers to one another. And yet, as the snow begins to fall, dusting the shoulders of these travelers with white, we can see that they are not afraid. They are at home in this wild, empty place. They are the masters of this new domain, unaware that their cousins in the south are also changing, also growing, preparing for a reunion that is still hundreds of thousands of years in the future. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of snow and pine resin, and the world seems to hold its breath. The separation is complete. The stage is set for two different experiments in being human. One will conquer the heat, the other will conquer the cold. And as twilight settles over this ancient diverging path, we wrap ourselves in the knowledge that for a very long time, the world was big enough for both. We leave them there, silhouettes against a pale glacial sky, walking steadily into the deepening chill, their footprints filling with snow almost as soon as they are made, marking the path toward a distinct and powerful destiny. Architects of the ice. The snow that began as a dusting on the shoulders of those early wanderers has now deepened into a white blanket that covers the world, and as the eons pass, the human form itself begins to shift in response to the biting wind. We are witnessing a masterclass in biological engineering, a slow and deliberate sculpting of flesh and bone designed to defy the lethal temperatures of the Pleistocene. Evolution is a patient craftsman, and here, in the crucible of the European ice, it is forging a survivor. As we zoom in from the wide gray horizon to focus on a single figure standing on a rocky outcrop, the first thing we notice is the sheer solidity of him. Gone is the lanky, heat-dissipating runner's build of the African savanna. In its place stands a powerhouse of heat conservation. He is not the stooped, shambling creature of Victorian caricature. He stands upright, proud and balanced, though he is shorter than the average modern human, perhaps 5 feet 5 inches tall. But do not mistake this stature for weakness. If you were to shake his hand, assuming he didn't accidentally crush yours with a grip strength that would shame a professional rock climber, you would feel the density of a being built for explosive power. His body is a fortress against the cold, adhering to the biological logic that a compact shape holds heat better than a long, slender one. His chest is a marvel of nature, deep and barrel-shaped, flaring wide to house enormous lungs that can gulp down the thin, frigid air of the steppe and oxygenate a body that burns energy like a furnace. This ribcage is not just for breathing. It is a structural arch designed to support immense muscular tension, for his life is one of grappling with heavy beasts and thrusting spears through thick hides. Beneath the surface, his bones tell a story of immense physical stress. The walls of his femur are thick, the joints broad and reinforced, suggesting a life of constant demanding movement. While our ancestors were built for the long, steady trot of the marathon runner, the Neanderthal is a sprinter, a wrestler, a creature of bursts and sudden overwhelming force. He is the linebacker of the hominid family, carrying a muscle mass that would require a modern human years of dedicated weight training to achieve. And he has done it simply by living. There is a gentle irony here. For all our modern obsession with gyms and protein shakes, we are fragile willows compared to the oak-like sturdiness of the average Neanderthal woman or man. But it is the face of our ancient cousin that draws us in most deeply, for it is here that the otherness is most striking, yet most human. As he turns his head into the wind, we see the defining features that have fascinated scientists for over a century. A prominent, continuous brow ridge arches over his eyes like a visor, a bony shelf that anchors the heavy facial muscles and perhaps signals social dominance or maturity. Beneath it, his eyes are large and deep-set, peering out at a world of low contrast and long winters. Some researchers believe their visual cortex was significantly larger than ours, tuning their brains to process the subtle movements of prey in the dim twilight of the northern latitudes. They saw the world differently, literally, with a sharpness in the gloom that we can only imagine. And then, the nose. It is a magnificent structure, broad and projecting, a biological radiator. As he breathes in the stinging sub-zero air, the complex, cavernous nasal passages inside that prominent beak work to warm and humidify the breath before it hits the delicate tissues of the lungs. It is a built-in climate control system, a testament to how intimately their bodies knew the cold. His jaw is heavy, lacking the protruding chin that defines our own species, yet it anchors teeth that are often worn down in a peculiar way, suggesting they used their mouths as a third hand to grip hides or tools while they worked. There is a softness to him, too, that belies the stone-like bones. Genetic whispers recovered from fragments of fossilized bone tell us that many of these northern dwellers had pale skin, freckles, and perhaps flaming red or sandy blonde hair. In a world with little sunlight, dark skin is a liability, blocking the synthesis of vital vitamin D. So, nature bleached them, turning them into the ghosts of the glacier, their fair complexions blending with the birch trees and the snow. Imagine a group of them huddled together, their breath misting in the air, their red hair matted with frost, looking for all the world like a band of mythical dwarves or wild spirits of the forest. We must also address the crown jewel of the Neanderthal anatomy, the brain. For decades, it was assumed that their brutish appearance meant they were stupid, but the skull tells a different truth. The average Neanderthal brain case is actually larger than that of a modern human, averaging around 1,600 cubic centimeters. It is a long, low football shape compared to our high, round soccer ball skulls, ending in a distinctive occipital bun at the back. This massive organ consumed a staggering amount of energy, roughly 20% of their body's caloric intake. Nature is ruthless with efficiency. It does not build expensive organs for no reason. This was a brain capable of complex thought, memory, and emotional depth, though perhaps wired differently than ours. It suggests a mind that was less about abstract social networking and more about an intense, visceral connection to the physical world, a mastery of space, material, and the immediate environment. As we stand beside him in the biting wind, we realize that calling him primitive is a failure of our own imagination. He is not a rough draft of humanity. He is a specialized masterpiece. He is the result of hundreds of thousands of years of successful adaptation. Every curve of his bone, every density of his muscle is a solution to the problem of survival in a freezer. He is the architect of the ice, built to endure where others would perish. The wind howls, picking up snow and driving it horizontally across the landscape, but he does not shiver. He stands firm, a warm, living island in a sea of white, perfectly attuned to the harsh melody of his world. And as the snow begins to blur his outline, we shift our gaze from the man to the world he inhabits, a landscape that is both his kingdom and his adversary, a place of terrible beauty that demands everything he has to give, a world of white silence. We step back now from the individual, pulling our focus wide until the figure of the Neanderthal becomes a speck against the crushing grandeur of his world. To understand the people, we must understand the stage upon which they played out their lives, and what a stage it is. We are entering the Pleistocene, an epoch where the earth itself seems to hold its breath, inhaling deeply of the cold. The landscape stretching before us is not merely winter as we know it, with cozy fires and holiday songs. It is a profound geological force that shapes every living thing. This is the Mammoth Steppe, a biome that has vanished from the modern world, a ghost ecosystem that once stretched in an unbroken ribbon from the Atlantic coast of Portugal all the way across the vast belly of Russia to the chill waters of the Bering Strait. It is a world of white silence, yes, but listen closely. Beneath the whistle of the wind, there is the hum of a vibrant, austere life. The first thing that strikes you is the light. In these high latitudes, the sun does not simply rise. It prowls the horizon, casting long, bruised shadows of violet and indigo across the snow. The air is so dry, so devoid of moisture, that the sky is a hard, crystalline blue, brittle as thin ice. It is a landscape of optical illusions, where sundogs, mock suns created by ice crystals in the atmosphere, stand like sentinels on either side of the true star, watching the world below. To the north, the great ice sheets loom like sleeping gods. The Fennoscandian Glacier covers what will one day be Scandinavia and much of Britain, a wall of ice 2 miles high that grinds the bedrock into flour. It is a silent monster, yet it is alive, constantly shifting, calving, and groaning with the deep bass frequency of the earth itself. These glaciers lock up so much of the world's water that the sea levels have plummeted, exposing vast tracts of land that we would call the ocean floor. The English Channel is a river valley. The North Sea is a grassy plain where herds of horses graze. The geography of the world is familiar, yet alien, a distorted map drawn by the hand of the frost. But do not mistake this for a barren wasteland. The Mammoth Steppe is a place of paradox. It is bitterly cold, yes, with winter temperatures plunging to 40 degrees below zero, a cold that snaps trees like twigs and freezes breath into ice on a beard before it can be exhaled. Yet, in the brief, explosive summers, this land transforms into a biological powerhouse. The soil, enriched by the rock dust ground by the glaciers, a substance known as loess, supports a rich carpet of nutrient-dense grasses, sedges, and aromatic herbs like sagebrush and wormwood. It is a dry, cold Serengeti. We walk through this knee-high sea of grass, the scent of crushed wild thyme rising with every step, and we realize that this ice age is actually teeming with giants. The scale of life here is staggering. In the distance, a herd of woolly mammoths moves like a drifting mountain range. They are the architects of this steppe, their massive tusks acting as snowplows to clear the grass for others, their heavy footfalls compacting the earth. To stand near one is to feel the vibration of history in your chest. They are the true lords of this realm, and the Neanderthals are merely nimble opportunists dancing around their feet. Close by, a woolly rhinoceros grunts, a creature that looks like a bad mood wrapped in a shag carpet, swinging its massive keratin horn to defend a patch of dried scrub. Herds of reindeer flow like water across the valley floor, their antlers clicking together like 1,000 knitting needles, a sound that signals both food and the coming of winter. Scholars and paleoecologists still argue passionately about the precise nature of this landscape. Was it a treeless plains environment, or was it a parkland mosaic, dotted with refugees of birch, pine, and spruce where the Neanderthals could find shelter and wood for their fires? The truth, as is often the case, likely lies in the variability. The climate was not a static, deep freeze, it was a flickering switch. We know now of the Dansgaard-Oeschger events, rapid climate fluctuations where temperatures could swing wildly within a human lifetime. Imagine the confusion and the adaptability required to live through a time when the world of your grandfather, lush and green, becomes the frozen tundra of your grandchildren. The Neanderthals surfed these waves of chaos, moving into the forests during the warm interglacials and retreating to the sheltered limestone valleys of France and the Mediterranean peninsulas, when the ice advanced. There is a profound loneliness here, a sense of being on the edge of the world. The silence is heavy, a physical weight that presses against the ears. It is broken only by the crack of a glacier miles away, sounding like a cannon shot, or the mournful drifting howl of a wolf pack. The competition. For the Neanderthal, this landscape is both a pantry and a graveyard. Every ridge could hide a meal or a predator. The cave lion, larger and more muscular than its modern African cousin, stalks the shadows of the rock faces. The cave hyena, with jaws strong enough to crush the femur of a mammoth, patrols the edges of the camps, waiting for a moment of weakness. It is a world of high stakes, where a broken ankle means death and a lost fire ember means freezing. Yet, there is beauty here that defies description. As night falls, the white silence is painted with the colors of the cosmos. The aurora borealis, untainted by any city lights, writhes across the zenith in sheets of green and blood red, a celestial dragon that the Neanderthals surely watched with awe. Did they name these lights? Did they tell stories of ancestors dancing in the sky? We cannot know for sure, but looking up at that same sky, it is impossible to believe that a brain as large and complex as theirs did not feel the stirrings of wonder. They are small, so small, in this vast cathedral of ice and stars. But they are not afraid. They know the secrets of the landscape. They know which south-facing slopes hold the heat of the sun and which winds bring the snow. They know that the white silence is not empty. It is listening. And they have learned to listen back, to read the messages written in the pattern of the frost and the flight of the ravens. They are not intruders here. They are the wild children of this white world, as much a part of the ecosystem as the wolf or the bear. And as the wind picks up again, swirling the dry snow into dancing devils, we see them move with purpose, their eyes scanning the horizon not just for beauty, but for the dark shapes that mean survival. The landscape has set the stage. Now, the hunt must begin. Masters of the hunt. The wind dies down, and the swirling snow settles into a stillness that feels almost holy, a quietude that serves as the curtain rising on the most dramatic act of the Neanderthal life. The hunt. We are accustomed to thinking of hunting as a sport or a distant necessity, packaged neatly in styrofoam trays, but for the people of the ice, it is a high-stakes negotiation with death itself. To understand them, we must stand with them in the pre-dawn gloom, shivering slightly not just from the cold, but from the electric tension that runs through the group like a current. They are gathering near a narrow ravine, a strategic choke point where the migratory paths of the great herds are forced to constrict. Observe their preparation. It is a ritual of silence and focus. There is no shouting, no barking of orders. These hunters know each other's minds so well that a shifted glance or a raised hand is a paragraph of instruction. They are checking their weapons, and here lies a marvel of engineering that predates the wheel. These are not the delicate, flighty arrows of later humans. These are the Schöningen-style spears, heavy 6 to 7 foot lances carved from the heartwood of spruce or yew. They are thick, balanced not for the arc of flight, but for the brutal geometry of the thrust. For a long time, historians argued that Neanderthals lacked the cognitive ability for projectile weaponry, doomed to only poke at beasts from arm's length. But recent ballistics tests and the discovery of specific impact fractures suggest a more nuanced reality. While they certainly preferred the intimate lethality of close quarters, they could and did hurl these heavy javelins with terrifying accuracy when the moment demanded it. Imagine the target, a steppe bison, a creature of brooding muscle and erratic temper weighing nearly a ton. Or perhaps, if the season is right and the tribe is strong, a woolly mammoth, a walking fortress of hair and tusk. The Neanderthals do not simply run at these monsters screaming. That is a Hollywood myth that would have resulted in a very short evolutionary history. Instead, they are the masters of the ambush. They use the landscape as a weapon, driving the herd toward soft, boggy ground where heavy hooves will sink, or toward the edge of a blind ravine. They move with a fluidity that belies their stocky frames, their pale bodies ghosting through the scrub brush, utilizing the wind to mask their scent. This is where their massive nasal cavities and heightened vision pay dividends, picking up the musky odor of the herd and the slight shift of a flank in the twilight. When the moment comes to strike, it is an explosion of violence and coordination that rivals any modern special forces operation. They burst from cover, closing the distance with sprinting speed. The lead hunters, likely the strongest males and females, for the injuries on their bones tell us that hunting was an equal opportunity hazard, drive their heavy spears into the soft tissue of the animal's flank or neck. This is the rodeo rider hypothesis in action. Paleontologists Eric Trinkhaus and T.D. Stewart famously noted that the pattern of healed fractures on Neanderthal skeletons, broken heads, crushed ribs, trauma to the neck, mirrors the injury reports of modern rodeo professionals. It is a comparison that brings a wince of sympathy. These people were interacting with angry, thrashing megafauna on a weekly basis. Every meal was a wrestling match with a beast 10 times their size. Yet, they healed, they survived, and they feasted. Chemical analysis of their bones, specifically the nitrogen-15 isotopes, confirms that Neanderthals were top-level carnivores, occupying a spot on the food chain even higher than hyenas or wolves. They were the apex of the apex, fueled by a diet of high-quality protein that powered their massive brains. But to stop the story at meat eater is to do them a disservice and to ignore the delightful complexity of their palate. Recent discoveries have scrubbed away the image of the pure carnivore to reveal a sophisticated forager who understood the landscape's softer bounty. If we zoom in on the dental plaque, the fossilized tartar of a Neanderthal from Spy Cave in Belgium or Shanidar in Iraq, we find microscopic granules of starch. They were eating wild rhizomes, water lilies, and cattails. They were roasting tubers to make them digestible, essentially inventing the prehistoric potato bake. In the Mediterranean caves of Vanguard and Gorham's in Gibraltar, the menu reads like a high-end seafood restaurant: toasted pine nuts, moss, perhaps for vitamin C, and evidence of seal, dolphin, and huge mussels harvested from the intertidal zones. They adapted. When the mammoth was scarce, they turned to the sea. When the winter broke, they turned to the earth. There's even evidence suggesting they used medicinal plants, traces of chamomile and yarrow. Bitter herbs with no nutritional value but known healing properties have been found trapped in their teeth. It seems our rugged cousins were the first to realize that sometimes you have to eat your greens, even if you'd prefer the steak. The hunt ends not with the kill, but with the processing, a task that required just as much skill as the takedown. Watch as the adrenaline fades, replaced by the heavy, satisfying work of butchery. They use flint flakes, sharp as surgical scalpels, to strip the hide and separate the meat from the bone. Nothing is wasted. The skin will become clothing and shelter. The sinew will become cordage. The bones will be cracked for their rich, buttery marrow or used as fuel in a landscape where wood is scarce. There is a solemnity to this work, a recognition of the life taken to sustain their own. They are covered in blood and grease, yes, but they are also covered in the glory of survival. They have turned the hostility of the Ice Age into a feast. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the snow in shades of lavender and gray, the hunters hoist the best cuts onto their broad shoulders. The heavy lifting that would buckle a modern spine is simply the commute home for them. They move back toward the safety of the rock face, leaving the scavengers, the foxes, and the ravens to squabble over the remnants. The silence returns to the steppe, but it is a different silence now. It is the quiet of a day one, of a belly that will soon be full. The cold is still there, biting and cruel. But for tonight, the architects of the ice have stolen fire from the belly of the beast. We follow them, weary but triumphant, following the trail of footprints that leads not just away from the kill, but toward something far more inviting: the flickering, golden promise of home. The trail of footprints leads us away from the biting wind of the open steppe and toward the shelter of a limestone cliff face where the gray rock meets the sky like a jagged shoulder. As we draw closer, the scent of the air changes. The metallic tang of snow and raw earth gives way to something richer, something that triggers an instinctual relaxation deep within the human brain. The smell of wood smoke. We are approaching the hearth, the beating heart of the Neanderthal world. If the hunt was the lungs that breathed in the energy of the landscape, the fire is the stomach that digests it, and the soul that binds the people together. We follow the hunters as they duck beneath the drip line of the rock shelter, a natural awning carved by millennia of water, and step into a space that is defined not by walls, but by light. Here, the white silence is held at bay by a circle of golden warmth. Archaeological sites like Abri Romani in Spain or the deep caves of the Dordogne reveal that Neanderthals were not messy squatters. They organized their living spaces with a domestic logic that we would recognize immediately. There is a zone for butchery, a zone for sleeping, and in the center, always, the hearth. Let us sit down near the fire, careful not to get too close, for this is a working blaze, not a decorative one. For decades, a scholarly battle raged over whether Neanderthals could truly create fire, or if they were merely fire harvesters, chasing lightning strikes and hoarding embers like desperate thieves. But modern analysis of manganese dioxide blocks, found with wear patterns suggesting they were scraped to lower the combustion temperature of wood, and the discovery of strikolites, pyrite and flint, have largely settled the debate. They were pyrotechnic engineers. Watch the elder of the group, a woman with gray woven into her red hair, as she tends the flames. She knows exactly which wood burns hot and fast to sear the meat, and which dense resinous pine will smolder through the long night to keep the frost away. She feeds the fire with a reverence that borders on the religious, for in this world, the death of the fire means the death of the tribe. The fire serves a dual purpose, the first of which is biological. We watch as the haunch of the bison brought back from the hunt is prepared. It is not torn apart raw with bloody teeth. That is the way of the wolf. Here, the meat is roasted. The fat drips onto the coals, hissing and sending plumes of savory smoke up to the cave ceiling, darkening the rock with soot that will remain for 40,000 years. This cooking is revolutionary. By breaking down the tough connective tissue and gelatinizing the proteins, the fire does the work of digestion before the food even touches their lips. It unlocks calories that would otherwise be lost, fueling those massive energy-hungry brains. They also boil. Yes, boil. Without ceramic pots, they use the pot boiler method, heating stones in the fire until they glow red, then dropping them into water-filled skin bags or birch bark containers to create a rolling, nutrient-rich broth of marrow and grease. It is the original comfort food, a warm, oily soup that fortifies them against the sub-zero night. But the fire does something even more important than cooking meat. It cooks culture. As the sun vanishes completely and the world outside becomes a void of howling wind and prowling hyenas, the circle of light becomes a stage. The fire lengthens the day. Instead of sleeping when the sun sets, like the baboons on the savannah, the Neanderthals stay awake. This extra time is the birthplace of humanity's social glue. Look around the circle. The tension of the hunt has evaporated. A young male, perhaps the one who stumbled in the bog earlier, is being teased. A universal language of soft nudges and mimicry that needs no complex grammar to be understood. Laughter, low and guttural, bounces off the cave walls. It is a sound of immense relief. In the corner, a pair is engaged in grooming. We often dismiss this as monkey business, but for Neanderthals, it is a sophisticated medical and emotional tool. They check each other for ticks and lice, yes, but the rhythmic stroking of hair and skin releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It is a silent language of care. I have your back, and you have mine. It is intimate, tender, and essential for a group that relies entirely on cooperation to survive. There is also a profound sense of safety here. The fire is a weapon that requires no ammunition. Outside the ring of light, the golden eyes of a cave lion might reflect the flames, but the beast will not pass the barrier. The fire is the first force field. It allows the tribe to sleep deeply, to dream without the constant jagged fear of being eaten. And sleep they do. They pile together on furs of bear and reindeer, a tangle of limbs and slow breathing. They sleep in a heap, likely for warmth, creating a puppy pile of humanity where the boundaries between individuals blur into a single breathing organism. Yet, the fire also illuminates the mind. Gazing into the shifting architecture of the flames, seeing faces in the embers, watching the smoke curl and vanish, this is the original television, the original meditation. Did they see spirits in the fire? Did they believe the sparks flying upward were returning to the stars? We cannot know their thoughts, but we know they had the capacity for them. The fire provided the leisure time to think, to plan, to remember. It turned the cave from a shelter into a home. And let's be honest, there is always that one person, we can see him now, leaning back against a limestone protrusions, who claims he's resting his eyes, but is snoring loudly enough to startle the bats on the ceiling. Even in the Pleistocene, the dad nap was a powerful force of nature. As the night deepens, the conversation slows to a murmur. The baby, wrapped in the softest fawn skin, nurses quietly in the firelight, her large, dark eyes reflecting the dancing flames. She is the future. She is safe. The wind howls outside, tearing at the trees, screaming across the tundra, but it cannot touch them here. They are the masters of the hearth, the keepers of the flame. The warmth sinks into their bones, healing the microfractures of the day's labor, soothing the sore muscles, knitting the group back together after the chaos of the hunt. The embers glow a deep pulsing red, breathing with the wind that sneaks past the entrance. We watch the shadows lengthen and stretch across the floor, distortions of the sleepers that dance on the walls like ghosts. The smell of the roasting meat has faded, replaced by the scent of pine resin and sleeping bodies. It is a scene of utter domestic tranquility, hidden in the wildest, harshest landscape Earth has ever known. We linger here for a moment, basking in the glow, feeling the heat on our faces, before we turn our attention to the corner of the cave where the tools of their survival are stacked, the silent stone testaments to their genius that we must now examine in the dim, flickering light of the dying fire. Stone, wood, and resin. The fire has burned down to a bed of glowing coals, a landscape of miniature mountains and valleys pulsing with a deep volcanic red. Most of the tribe is asleep, a tangle of limbs and soft breathing under the heavy furs, but one figure remains awake. We find him sitting slightly apart near the entrance where the moonlight spills onto the cave floor, mixing with the firelight to create a twilight zone of visibility. He is the maker, the engineer, the keeper of the technology that stands between his people and extinction. In his hands, he holds not a weapon, but a promise, a nodule of dark, glassy flint that he has carried for miles, knowing its hidden potential. We settle in beside him to watch the oldest industrial process on Earth unfold, a symphony of percussion and physics that is known to archaeologists as the Mousterian industry. Listen closely. Click, clack, click. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic sound, the heartbeat of the Stone Age. He is not mindlessly bashing rocks together. He's playing three-dimensional chess with geology. This is the Levallois technique, a method of stone napping so sophisticated that modern students of archaeology often require months of practice to replicate it without smashing their own thumbs. The genius lies in the preparation. He does not simply chip away at the stone to reveal a tool. He prepares the core, the raw block, shaping it carefully into a dome that looks somewhat like a tortoise shell. He strikes the edges, turning the stone in his hand, calculating the angles of fracture, the physics of the shock waves that will travel through the silica. He is pre-planning the final product before it even exists, a cognitive leap that proves he possesses abstract thought and forward planning. Then, with a single decisive blow to a prepared platform on the rock, crack, he detaches a perfect razor-sharp flake. It falls into his palm, a leaf-shaped blade with edges sharper than the finest surgical steel. It is instant, lethal perfection. He holds it up to the firelight, inspecting the edge. It is thin, translucent at the rim and capable of slicing through the toughest mammoth hide as if it were butter. But a stone blade alone is just a sharp rock. The true revolution of the Neanderthal mind lies in what happens next. Hafting, or the marriage of stone and wood. He reaches for a wooden shaft, perhaps a straight, sturdy branch of yew or ash that he has already scraped smooth. To attach the stone to the wood requires more than just hope and a bit of string. It requires chemistry. This is where our ancient cousin reveals his most surprising talent. He is an industrial chemist. Beside him, in a small covered pit near the fire, he has been cooking something. It is not food. It is birch bark, tightly rolled and buried under hot ash. If he were to burn the bark in the open air, it would simply turn to ash. But he has learned, perhaps by a happy accident, perhaps by tireless experimentation, that if he heats the bark to roughly 340 to 400 degrees Celsius in an oxygen-free environment, a process we call dry distillation, it sweats out a sticky black tar-like substance. This is birch tar, the world's first synthetic glue. It is a technological marvel. If the fire is too hot, the tar ruins. If it is too cool, no tar forms. He has mastered this Goldilocks zone of temperature control without a thermometer, relying only on the color of the smoke and the heat on his skin. He collects the warm, viscous pitch on a stick. It smells acrid and smoky, a scent of ancient industry that clings to his hair and skin. With the focus of a watchmaker, he daubs the glue onto the notched end of the wooden shaft. He presses the stone point into the tar, positioning it perfectly. The glue is hot and pliable now, but when it cools, it will become hard as rock, a bond that is water-resistant and incredibly durable. He then wraps the junction with wet animal sinew, the processed tendons of a reindeer or bison. As the sinew dries, it will shrink, binding the stone, the wood, and the glue into a single unified tool. There is a profound beauty in this composite object. It is a spear, yes, but it is also a symbol of synthesis. It combines the mineral world, stone, the plant world, wood and tar, and the animal world, sinew, into an extension of the human will. It turns the short reach of a man into the long, deadly reach of a predator. He spins the shaft in his hands, checking the balance. It is perfect, but his work is not done. He picks up a piece of bone, a rib perhaps, that he has shaped into a smooth, rounded tool known as a lissoir. These smoothers are still used by high-end leather workers in Paris today to burnish hides. He picks up a piece of leather that has been soaking, perhaps in a mixture of brains and water. Don't wrinkle your nose. The fatty acids in brain tissue are excellent for tanning. And begins to work it. He rubs the bone tool back and forth, compressing the fibers, making the leather water-resistant and lustrous. This is vital. In the Ice Age, clothing was not fashion, it was life support. A poorly made coat meant hypothermia. A gap in a boot meant frostbite. The Neanderthals were likely the inventors of tailored clothing, using bone awls to punch holes in sinew to stitch together complex garments, parkas, trousers, mittens. They were wrapping themselves in technology. We watch his hands, broad and capable, moving with a grace that defies the clumsy caveman stereotype. His fingernails are short and strong, his palms calloused from a lifetime of friction. There is a meditative quality to his work. The scrape of the bone on leather, the snap of the fire, the soft snoring of his clan. It is a scene of deep peace. He is not just surviving, he is crafting. He pauses to wipe a smudge of birch tar from his thumb, a gesture so human it bridges the 40,000-year gap in an instant. We've all been there, trying to fix a mug or a shoe and ending up with more superglue on our fingers than on the object. He chuckles softly to himself, a low rumble in his chest, and rubs the sticky spot against a patch of dry moss. It is these small moments, these tiny errors and corrections that make him real to us. He is not a museum exhibit, he is a man trying to finish his chores before bed. Finally, he is satisfied. He leans the new spear against the limestone wall, where it joins a row of others, a silent arsenal ready for the morning. He places the lissoir back in his pouch, a personal toolkit that he carries everywhere. He stretches, his spine cracking audibly, another universal human experience, and looks out at the moon. The landscape is silver and black, cold and indifferent, but inside the cave, thanks to his hands and his mind, there is warmth, there is light, and there is the reassuring presence of tools that work. He has turned the raw materials of nature into a culture. He lies down near the fire, pulling a heavy fur over his shoulder, his work done for the night. The stone flakes on the floor catch the last dying light of the embers, glittering like fallen stars, the debris of genius. We leave him to his dreams, knowing that tomorrow those tools will mean the difference between life and death. But for now, they are simply the resting artifacts of a job well done. The sound of the stone knapper's rhythmic clicking fades into the velvet silence of the past, and we let the current of time carry us gently southeast, away from the icy plains of Europe and toward the rugged sun-drenched peaks of the Zagros Mountains in what is now Iraqi Kurdistan. Here, in the vast cathedral of Shanidar Cave, the air is warmer, smelling of wild sage pine resin and the dust of millennia. It is morning, and a shaft of golden sunlight pierces the gloom of the cave entrance, illuminating a figure who challenges everything we thought we knew about the survival of the fittest. Meet Nandi. That is the affectionate nickname archaeologists have given to the individual formerly known as Shanidar I, and as we sit invisibly beside him, it is easy to see why he inspires such tenderness. He is an old man by the standards of the Pleistocene, perhaps 40 or 45 years old, his hair streaked with iron gray and his face etched with the deep lines of a life lived hard. But it is not his age that stops us, it is his body. To look at him is to see a living catalog of trauma, a testament to a life so perilous that in the animal kingdom he would have been dead decades ago. Look closer at his face. The left side is scarred and misshapen, the result of a crushing blow to the head received in his youth. The injury fractured his eye socket, likely leaving him blind in that eye and possibly affecting the brain beneath. It would have been a blinding, disorienting agony that should have left him vulnerable to the first hyena that caught his scent. But he survived. Now look at his right arm. It is withered, a fraction of the size of his left, the bones wasted and thin. The lower part of the arm is missing entirely, amputated just above the elbow. Was it a rock fall? A hunting accident? We cannot know, but we know the bone healed, rounded and smooth over the years. He has lived with this disability for a very long time. He shifts his weight, and we see a grimace of pain cross his features. His right leg is twisted, the foot malformed, forcing him to walk with a severe, painful limp. Furthermore, bony growths in his ear canals, known as exostoses, suggest he is partially, if not profoundly, deaf. Here is a man who cannot see the predator coming on his left, cannot hear the warning shout of his clan, cannot run away, and cannot draw a bow or throw a heavy spear with two hands. In the brutal calorie-counting logic of natural selection, Shanidar I is a liability. He is a useless mouth, and yet look at him. He's not starving. He's not cast out. He is resting on a soft pile of furs near the fire, and he is well fed. This scene, right here, is the smoking gun of Neanderthal humanity. It destroys the Victorian myth of the heartless brute more effectively than any stone tool ever could. Nandi survived because he was loved. There is no other explanation. Someone, likely many someones, processed his food for him when his teeth wore down. Someone guided him when the path was treacherous. Someone dressed his wounds with medicinal herbs, perhaps the yarrow and chamomile that grow in the valley below, keeping the infection at bay until the bone could knit. Watch as a younger woman approaches him. She does not look at him with pity. She looks at him with respect. She hands him a portion of the morning's catch, perhaps a soft, fatty piece of ibex meat that has been pounded to make it easier to chew. He takes it with his good hand, nodding a silent thanks. This interaction implies a complex social web. It suggests that Neanderthal society was not a tyranny of muscle, but a circle of care. They valued their elderly not for what they could do, but for who they were. Perhaps Nandi was the storyteller, the keeper of the oral history. In a world without writing, an old man's memory is the library of the tribe. He knows where the water springs are when the drought comes. He remembers the last time the herds migrated early. He knows which berries kill and which ones cure. His crippled body houses a mind that is the tribe's most valuable survival tool. There is a scholarly debate that hums quietly around this scene. The grandmother hypothesis. While usually applied to modern humans, it fits here perfectly. The idea is that the presence of older, non-reproducing individuals increases the survival rate of the grandchildren. Nandy, unable to hunt, may have been the babysitter. Imagine him sitting by the fire, his one good eye watching over a gaggle of rowdy Neanderthal toddlers while the parents are out on the step. He teaches them to knap flint, holding the core with his feet, a behavior seen in modern amputees, or shows them how to twist plant fibers into cordage. He is the anchor of the group, the steady center around which the chaotic life of the hunter-gatherers revolves. And let's be honest, he probably also serves as the tribe's grumpy supervisor. We can almost hear him grunting in disapproval as a teenager brings back a poorly made spear, gesturing with his withered arm as if to say, "In my day, we made points that actually stayed sharp, and we walked uphill both ways to the mammoth herd, in the snow." Chi. Soft humor aside, his presence suggests a depth of emotional intelligence that mirrors our own. Empathy is not a luxury, it is a survival strategy. By caring for the weak, the tribe ensures that if they become weak, they too will be cared for. It is the birth of the golden rule, written not in ink, but in the healed fractures of a femur and the rounded stump of an arm. As the morning wears on, the pain in Nandy's leg seems to flare up. Perhaps a storm is coming. His joints are better barometers than the sky. The woman returns, this time with a small pouch. She pulls out a handful of dried leaves, perhaps ephedra, a stimulant and pain reliever known to be used in the region deep into prehistory. She chews them into a poultice or brews them in a little water heated by a hot stone. She tends to him with a practiced gentleness. This is not instinct. This is medicine. It is the application of knowledge to alleviate suffering. It is the refusal to let nature take its cruel course. We sit with them for a long time, watching the sunlight move across the cave floor, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. The violence of the hunt, the cold of the ice, the sharpness of the stone. All of that feels distant now. Here, in the quiet of the cave, the dominant force is compassion. We realize that the Neanderthals were not just surviving the Ice Age, they were helping each other survive it. They were holding hands in the dark. As Nandy drifts into a doze, his chin resting on his chest, we see the tension leave his face. He is safe. He is valued. He is home. The fire crackles softly, a lullaby of warmth and wood smoke. We leave him there, sleeping peacefully under the protection of his kin, and we carry with us a new understanding, that the measure of a human, even an ancient one, is not just the strength of their arm, but the size of their heart. We step back out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the Zagros Mountains, leaving the sanctuary of the caregivers to explore another, even more surprising dimension of their souls, the awakening of the artist. The fire at the cave mouth has burned low, but we are not staying by the embers this time. We are going deeper. We are leaving the domestic sphere, the place of food and sleep, to journey into the dark, hidden recesses of the Neanderthal world, and perhaps into the hidden recesses of their minds. To follow them here, we must leave the starlight behind and crawl into the belly of the earth. The air grows cool and damp, smelling of wet limestone and the metallic tang of dissolved minerals. The sound of the wind outside is replaced by the rhythmic, eternal drip, drip, drip of water percolating through the rock, a metronome counting down the millennia in the dark. We find ourselves in a narrow passage, illuminated only by the flickering, greasy light of a torch. It is a simple thing, a branch wrapped in animal fat and juniper, but it casts long, dancing shadows that seem to animate the stone walls. The figure ahead of us is not hunting. He's carrying something precious, not meat, but a small shell container filled with a red powder. This is ochre, an iron-rich hematite that has been ground into a fine dust. For decades, archaeologists found this red dust at Neanderthal sites and shrugged, assuming it was used for tanning hides or perhaps as an insect repellent. But as we watch him stop before a smooth, pale expanse of flowstone, we realize it is something far more profound. He's preparing to speak, not with his voice, which is perfectly capable of speech. Recent studies of the Neanderthal hyoid bone suggest they had the anatomy for complex language, but with his spirit. He mixes the red dust with a little water or spit in his mouth, creating a thick, rusty paint. He places his left hand against the cold, white wall. His fingers are thick, the palm broad, a hand that has wrestled bison and cradled infants. Then he leans forward and blows. A spray of red pigment erupts from his lips, coating the rock and outlining his hand in a negative image. He pulls his hand away, and there it is, a red ghost, a signature, a declaration of existence. I was here. I am. This act, occurring in caves like Maltravieso in Spain or Ardales, dates back at least 64,000 years. That is a staggering number. It means these paintings were created 20,000 years before Homo sapiens even set foot in Europe. For a long time, the scholarly consensus was that art was the exclusive franchise of our species, a spark that only we possessed. If Neanderthals made anything that looked like art, it was dismissed as them merely copying the cool new kids on the block. But the uranium-thorium dating of the calcite overlying these pigments has shattered that arrogance. The Neanderthals were the first dreamers. They were the first to look at a blank surface and see a canvas. But their artistic soul did not stop at graffiti. Let us move to another scene, this time in the sunlit entrance of a cave in Krapina, Croatia. We see a young Neanderthal sitting cross-legged, working with a pile of majestic, curved objects. They are eagle talons. Specifically, they are the claws of the white-tailed eagle, a formidable raptor that does not give up its feet easily. These talons have been carefully cut and smoothed, and tellingly, they have been strung together on a piece of sinew. This is not a tool. It is a necklace, or perhaps a bracelet. Why is this significant? Because jewelry serves no survival function. You cannot eat a necklace. You cannot kill a deer with a bracelet. Jewelry is entirely symbolic. It communicates identity, status, or beauty. It says, I am part of the eagle clan, or I am a great hunter, or simply, I like how this looks. Chai. It implies a theory of mind, the ability to understand that other people see you and form opinions about you. It suggests that Neanderthals had fashion. Imagine a group of them, their pale skin adorned with black eagle claws and perhaps feathers stuck into their hair or woven into their clothes. It gives them a certain prehistoric, goth aesthetic that is surprisingly relatable. They weren't just surviving the Ice Age, they were accessorizing for it. And then there is the mystery of the deep. In 2016, deep inside Bruniquel Cave in France, researchers found something that defies all explanation. We travel there now, slipping through a narrow squeeze, hundreds of meters from the entrance, into a chamber of total darkness. Here, on the floor, are two large rings built from broken stalagmites, hundreds of them. They have been snapped off, arranged in precise circles and stacked in layers. Traces of fire show that they burned bone or wood inside these circles. These structures are 176,000 years old. Let that sink in. This is not a campfire. This is architecture. This is ritual. Why build a stone circle deep underground where no one can see it? Was it a shrine? A meeting place for a secret society? A playground for Neanderthal children who were really into Legos? We don't know. But the sheer effort required to carry light, to break the stone, to arrange it, speaks of a mind that is compelled by something other than hunger. It speaks of the sacred. It hints that they had a relationship with the unseen world, with the dark, with the mysteries of the earth itself. There is a softness to this realization. We have spent so long looking at their bones, measuring their muscle attachments, that we forgot to look for their souls. But here, in the flicker of the torchlight, the evidence is overwhelming. They collected fossils and crystals, bringing them back to their caves simply because they were interesting. They used red ochre to paint their bodies, perhaps for ceremonies we will never understand. They were not biological robots programmed for survival. They were people who paused to watch a sunset, who felt the urge to create, who understood that there is more to life than just the next meal. The red handprint on the wall begins to dry, the color deepening to the hue of dried blood. It is a message sent across the abyss of time, a wave from a lost cousin. It challenges us to expand our definition of human. If humanity means the ability to think in symbols, to appreciate beauty, to leave a mark on the world that says, "I existed," then the Neanderthals were fully, brilliantly human long before we arrived. We linger for a moment in the presence of this ancient masterpiece. The cave is silent again, save for the water and the breathing of the artist, who stands back to admire his work. He wipes a smear of red from his lip, a universal gesture of the messy creative process, and smiles. It is a private moment of satisfaction. He does not know that 60,000 years later, we will find this mark and weep with the recognition of it. He only knows that the wall was empty, and now it speaks. As the torch burns low, threatening to plunge us into absolute darkness, we turn back toward the entrance. We have seen the hunter, the firemaker, the caregiver, and now the artist. But the story is not over. The most poignant chapter lies ahead, in the way they said goodbye. We must leave the cave of dreams and step back into the gray light of the steppe to witness the final somber act of love that binds their species, and ours, to the earth forever. Returning to the earth. The torchlight that illuminated the red handprint flickers and fades, and we are drawn away from the walls of the cave, back toward the center of the living space where the mood has shifted from creation to a profound stillness. The wind outside has died down, and the silence that settles over the valley is heavy, weighted with a sorrow that transcends species. We are about to witness the most intimate and arguably the most human act of all, the refusal to let go. For a long time, the scientific community held a rather bleak view of Neanderthal mortality. The assumption was that when a member of the tribe died, they were simply left where they fell, treated with the same indifference as a carcass on the steppe. But the earth has yielded a different story, one of tenderness and intentionality. We find ourselves now in the limestone shelter of La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, roughly 60,000 years ago. A member of the clan has passed away, the old man, as archaeologists will later call him. He was a venerable figure, toothless and riddled with arthritis, a man who had been kept alive by the charity of his kin for years. Now, his struggle is over. Watch what happens next. The tribe does not drag him out to the hyenas. Instead, they begin to dig. This is not a trivial task. They have no shovels, only digging sticks and scoop-like bison scapulae. The floor of the cave is hard, packed limestone and clay. To dig a pit here requires hours of strenuous labor, an expenditure of calories that, in the ruthless economy of the Ice Age, makes no survival sense. Why waste energy on the dead? The answer lies in the grief on the faces of those digging. They are carving a cradle out of the stone. When the depression is deep enough, they gently lower him in. They do not toss him, they place him. He is arranged in a flexed position, knees drawn up to his chest, almost like a fetus in the womb, a sleeping posture that suggests rest rather than finality. One of them, perhaps a daughter or a mate, places a bison leg over his head and chest. Is this a final meal for the journey, a protective covering, or simply a cherished object? We cannot know the theology, but we can feel the emotion. They are tucking him in. The debate over Neanderthal burial has been fierce. Skeptics have argued that these graves were merely natural depressions or attempts to hide the smell of decomposition from predators. But the evidence is stubborn. At La Forêt, a rock shelter in southwestern France, we find not just one, but 8 individuals buried, adults, children, and even infants. The graves are oriented east to west. This is not random disposal. This is a cemetery. It implies a connection to a specific place, a desire to keep the ancestors close. The dead are not gone. They are just under the floor, sleeping beneath the feet of the living. But the most poignant scene awaits us back in Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains. It is here that we encounter the famous flower burial. The year is roughly 60,000 BC, or perhaps closer to 50,000, and a man known as Shanidar IV has died. He is laid to rest on his side. Years later, when soil samples from around the body are analyzed by palynologists, pollen experts, they find something extraordinary: clumps of pollen from specific wildflowers: yarrow, cornflower, bachelor's button, St. Barnaby's thistle, ragwort, grape hyacinth, and hollyhock. Imagine the scene. It is late spring or early summer. The valley below is bursting with color. The mourners have gone out into the hills, gathering armfuls of bright yellow, blue, and white blossoms. They return to the dark cave and weave these flowers into the boughs of pine and tamarisk that line the grave. They sprinkle the petals over the body of their friend. The air, usually smelling of smoke and sweat, is suddenly filled with the sweet, sharp scent of wild meadows. Now, we must be honest historians and acknowledge the Persian Jurd controversy. In recent years, some scientists have suggested that burrowing rodents, specifically the Persian Jurd, might have dragged the flowers into the cave and stored them near the body, creating the illusion of a floral tribute. It is a deflating thought, isn't it? A bit like finding out the tooth fairy is just your dad. However, the clusters of pollen were found in the grave, and some of the flowers, like the hollyhock and yarrow, have known medicinal properties. It is entirely possible that the rodents helped, but it is equally possible that the Neanderthals selected these plants for their healing powers, sending their loved one into the afterlife with a medicine kit. And even if a rodent was involved, does it truly erase the image of the grave itself? The care taken to dig it? The fact that they chose to keep him? Let us choose to believe the poetry of the moment, for it aligns with everything else we know about their empathy. The image of a rugged, heavy-browed Neanderthal weeping over a grave, clutching a bouquet of blue cornflowers, is a powerful antidote to the monster myth. It bridges the gap between us. Grief is the price we pay for love, and it seems the Neanderthals paid it in full. There is a smaller, even more heartbreaking grave at Teshiktash in Uzbekistan. Here, a young Neanderthal child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, was buried. Around the small skeleton, the mourners placed pairs of goat horns, forming a circle or a fence. It looks like a crib. It looks like protection. The tenderness required to bury a child, to acknowledge that a potential future has been cut short, is a heavy burden. It suggests they understood the tragedy of lost time. As they begin to fill the grave at La Chapelle, scraping the limestone dust back over the body, the mood is not one of terror, but of closure. They are returning him to the earth. The dust-to-dust concept is not a Victorian invention. It is a reality they lived every day. They cover him up, patting the earth down, perhaps placing a few heavy stones on top to keep the bears away. Then they stand up. The work is done. The hole in the tribe remains, but the physical task is complete. They return to the fire, which is burned low. Life must go on. The tools must be made. The meat must be cooked. But the atmosphere has changed. The cave is now a reliquary. They are living with their ghosts. This practice of burial suggests a cognitive leap that is truly profound. It implies an awareness of the future and the past. It suggests that a person is more than just a biological machine. They are an entity that deserves respect, even when the machinery stops. It hints at the dawn of religion, or at least of metaphysics. Did they believe the old man was watching them? Did they tell stories about him to the children who would be born next winter? The continuity of the site suggests they did. They were building a history, layer by layer, bone by bone. The sun sets outside, casting long shadows across the valley. The old man sleeps in his stone cradle, safe from the cold, safe from the wolves. He is the first of many who will rest here, a silent testament to the fact that humanity, in all its forms, is defined by how we treat our dead. We leave the mourners to their quiet evening, their silhouettes dark against the firelight. But as we drift away, moving forward in time, we sense a change on the wind. The isolation of these people is coming to an end. A new group is moving into the neighborhood, bringing with them different tools, different ornaments, and a destiny that will intertwine with the Neanderthals in ways both beautiful and tragic. The cousins are coming. The smoke from the burial fire at La Chapelle-aux-Saints drifts upward, dispersing into the cold, starry sky. But the wind that carries it away brings something new in return. It is a scent that the Neanderthals have not smelled in thousands of years, a scent carried on the breath of the southeast wind. It smells of different fires, different furs, and perhaps faintly of the sea. We are moving forward now to a pivotal moment around 45,000 years ago. The isolation of the European continent is ending. The long, lonely winter of the Neanderthals is about to be interrupted by a family reunion that will change the course of history. We stand on a ridge overlooking the Danube River Valley, a major artery of migration that cuts through the heart of the continent. Below us, moving along the riverbank, is a group of strangers. They are Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, the wise men who have walked out of Africa, crossed the Levant, and are now pushing into the domain of the Ice Age kings. Through the eyes of a Neanderthal watcher crouched in the scrub oak, they must have seemed both alien and eerily familiar. They are taller, these newcomers, with longer limbs and lighter builds, bodies still echoing the heat of the African savanna. Their faces are different too. They lack the heavy brow ridges, their foreheads rise high and vertical, and they have distinct protruding chins. Their skin is likely darker, rich with melanin, though they are bundled in furs that are stitched with a precision the Neanderthals are only just beginning to master. They move in larger groups, their voices carrying a different cadence, perhaps higher and more rapid. They are the Cro-Magnons, armed with delicate blade tools and bone points that fly true and far. For decades, the story of this encounter was written in blood. Victorian scholars and early 20th century writers imagined a war of the worlds, a violent genocide where the superior, intelligent sapiens simply wiped out the brutish Neanderthals with better weapons and sharper wits. But the bones tell a different, far more scandalous story. We zoom in now to a quiet clearing in the forests of what is now Romania, to a site known as Peștera cu Oase, or the Cave with Bones. Here, in 2002, spelunkers found a jawbone. It looked mostly human, with a chin and modern teeth, but there was something off. The ascending ramus was wide, the molars were huge. When geneticists finally extracted DNA from this bone in 2015, the results were a bombshell. This individual, a modern human male, had a Neanderthal ancestor just 4 to 6 generations back. His great-great-grandfather was a Neanderthal. Let that sink in. This was not a war of extermination, it was a love story, or at least a lust story. When these two populations met in the twilight of the Pleistocene, they didn't just fight, they mated. They looked across the campfire and saw not a monster, but a partner. There must have been curiosity. Imagine a Neanderthal woman, her red hair braided with shells, encountering a sapiens hunter. There is a language barrier, yes, but the language of the eyes, of food sharing, of warmth, is universal. This interbreeding was not a rare, one-off event. It happened multiple times in different places, in the Levant, in the Zagros Mountains, and here in the deep forests of Europe. The assimilation model suggests that the incoming waves of modern humans didn't just replace the Neanderthals, they absorbed them. The Neanderthal population was always small, perhaps numbering only in the tens of thousands across the entire continent, living in isolated bands. The sapiens came in waves, a demographic tsunami. It was a numbers game. The Neanderthals were simply genetically swamped, bred out of existence as their distinct lineage dissolved into the larger gene pool of the newcomers. But it wasn't a one-way street of genetic conquest. The Neanderthals gave us gifts that keep us alive today. As we watch a mixed group huddled together, a sapiens mother nursing a child with the pale eyes of its Neanderthal father, we are witnessing the transfer of biological superpowers. The Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to the pathogens of Eurasia. They had immune systems that knew how to fight the local viruses and bacteria. When they mated with sapiens, they passed these immune defenses, specifically certain HLA alleles, to their hybrid children. If you have ever fought off a nasty flu or a skin infection, you might have your Neanderthal great-great-great-grandfather to thank. They also gave us thicker skin and the ability to produce keratin, helping our ancestors survive the cold that they were not originally built for. It was the ultimate biological care package. Welcome to the North. Here's a coat and here's an immune system. Good luck. However, this meeting was also a tragedy. We must not romanticize it entirely. There was competition. The sapiens brought with them dogs, or rather, wolf dogs, the early ancestors of our domesticated companions. These animals revolutionized hunting, allowing sapiens to track prey more efficiently and guard their kills. The Neanderthals, as far as we know, had no dogs. They hunted alone or in small groups, relying on ambush. The efficiency gap began to widen. The large herds of mammoth and bison were thinning out due to climate change, and with two apex predators now chasing the same shrinking resource, the pressure on the Neanderthals became immense. We see the tension in the landscape. The Neanderthal bands retreat further into the marginal lands, into the high mountains of Gibraltar and the Caucasus, seeking refuge from the encroaching tide of humanity. Their fires grow fewer. Their gene pool, already shallow, begins to suffer from inbreeding. The genetic meltdown hypothesis suggests that harmful mutations accumulated in their small populations, weakening them just as they needed to be strongest. Yet, in the caves where they coexisted, like Mandrin Cave in France, where layers of Neanderthal and sapiens occupation alternate like a club sandwich, there is evidence of cultural exchange. Did the Neanderthals teach the sapiens how to make the specialized bone tools known as lissoirs? It seems so, for these tools appear in sapiens kits only after they arrive in Europe. Did the sapiens share the secrets of their projectile weaponry? It's a tantalizing thought. The scene shifts to a campfire on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It is late in the era of the Neanderthals, perhaps 39,000 years ago. A mixed group sits together. The distinctions are blurring. The children playing by the fire are neither fully Neanderthal nor fully sapiens. They are the bridge. They are us. The heavy brows are softening. The chins are sharpening. But the robust build and the deep knowledgeable eyes remain. There is a melancholy beauty in this assimilation. The distinct Neanderthal identity, the people of the valley, the masters of the ice, is fading like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. But they are not dying out in the traditional sense. They are pouring themselves into the river of our future. They are becoming the ghost in our machine. The love affairs, the brief encounters in the forest, the shared winters, all of it is being written into the DNA that will one day build the cities and write the symphonies of the modern world. As the fire burns down, the sapien storyteller begins a tale, his voice rising and falling in a complex rhythm. The Neanderthals listen, their heads cocked, absorbing the new sounds, the new syntax. They are witnessing the birth of a new kind of human mind, one that will eventually dominate the planet. But tonight, there is no dominance. There is only the shared warmth against the encroaching dark. The cousins have met, and in their embrace, they have sealed a pact of survival that will outlast the ice itself. We leave them there, a tangled knot of humanity, and turn our faces toward the inevitable end of the era and the beginning of the legacy that lives on in the mirror. The fires that once dotted the valleys of Europe, from the limestone cliffs of the Dordogne to the frozen steppes of Russia, are flickering out one by one. The great era of the Neanderthals is drawing to a close, not with the crash of a meteor or the roar of a volcano, but with the quiet, melancholy sigh of a tide receding from the shore. We travel now to the very edge of their world, to the Rock of Gibraltar, a limestone sentinel guarding the gateway to the Mediterranean. Here, in the cavernous shelter of Gorham's Cave, the last of our cousins make their final stand. The year is roughly 28,000 to 24,000 years ago, though the dates are whispered in academic circles with caution. The climate has turned erratic again, the Heinrich events sending armadas of icebergs into the Atlantic, cooling the world and drying out the forests. The Neanderthals here are survivors of survivors, clinging to a lifestyle that is vanishing. They still hunt the ibex on the craggy slopes. They still roast pine nuts in the embers. They still gaze out at the ocean, perhaps wondering where their kin have gone. But the groups are smaller now. The gene pool is a shallow puddle. The nights are longer, and the silence between the songs is deeper. Eventually, the last fire in Gorham's cave burns down to cold ash. The last tool is dropped, perhaps by a hand that has grown too weary to hold it. And then, there is only the sound of the waves crashing against the rock and the cry of the gulls. The physical form of the Neanderthal, the heavy brow, the barrel chest, the powerful arm, vanishes from the fossil record. The curtain falls on 400,000 years of dominance. For tens of thousands of years, they are forgotten, dismissed as trolls or monsters in the folklore of the sapiens who replaced them. They become the wild men of the woods, the ogres under the bridge. But history has a way of haunting us. Fast forward to the year 2010. We are no longer in a cave, but in the pristine, sterile, clean rooms of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. Here, a Swedish geneticist named Svante Pääbo is doing the impossible. He's reading the Book of the Dead. Using fragments of bone from Vindija Cave in Croatia, Pääbo and his team have reconstructed the Neanderthal genome. It is a puzzle of billions of pieces, degraded by time and bacteria. But as the computer screens flicker with the sequence of A, C, G, and T, a shocking truth emerges. The Neanderthals did not just disappear, they didn't just die out, they moved in. The comparison of the Neanderthal genome with modern human DNA reveals that every non-African person alive today, whether you are from Tokyo, Paris, New York, or the indigenous tribes of the Amazon, carries between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. We are hybrids. The extinction was an absorption. We are the children of those twilight encounters in the forests of the Levant and Europe. This realization changes everything. It means that when you look in the mirror, you are not looking at a pure Homo sapiens. You are looking at a mosaic. The ghost is in the machine. And this ghost is not silent, it is active. That 2% is not junk DNA, it is a biological toolkit that helped our ancestors survive the unfamiliar north. Consider your skin. The genes that determine the thickness of your keratinocytes, the cells that make up your skin and hair, are often Neanderthal in origin. They gave us the tough, waterproof shield we needed to withstand the moist, cold winters of Eurasia. If you have straight, thick hair, you might be thanking a Neanderthal grandmother. Consider your immune system. A cluster of genes, known as the HLA haplotypes, essential for recognizing and destroying pathogens, was inherited from them. When sapiens arrived in Europe, they were vulnerable to local diseases. The Neanderthals, having lived there for hundreds of thousands of years, were already immune. By breeding with them, we acquired their antivirus software. It is likely that without this genetic gift, our species might have been wiped out by an ancient flu before we ever built the pyramids. There are even whispers that our circadian rhythms, whether we are morning larks or night owls, might be influenced by Neanderthal genes adapted to the extreme seasonal shifts in daylight of the high latitudes. Some researchers suggest that the propensity for blood to clot quickly, a lifesaver when you are wounded by a mammoth but a risk factor for strokes in modern sedentary life, is another legacy of our rugged cousins. We carry their strengths and we carry their vulnerabilities. We are the vessel for their memory. This genetic resurrection forces a profound philosophical shift. We can no longer view ourselves as the winners who defeated the losers. We are the result of a collaboration. The Neanderthals were not a failed experiment. They were a successful one that merged with another. They were the specialists of the cold, the first artists, the first to care for the disabled, the first to bury their dead with flowers. They were humans in every way that matters, differing from us only in the shape of their skulls and the robustness of their bones. As we stand in the laboratory, looking at the helix on the screen, the distance between us and them collapses. We realize that Nandi from Shanidar Cave, the artist from Maltravieso, and the mother from Gibraltar are not strangers. They are family. They are the great-aunts and great-uncles who stayed behind to keep the fire burning while we wandered the world. And in a way, they are still here. Whenever you feel the chill of winter and pull your coat tighter, you are using a brain that was shaped by their struggle. Whenever you feel a surge of compassion for the injured, you are tapping into a social instinct they pioneered. Whenever you create something beautiful just for the sake of it, you are channeling the spirit of the first dreamers. The fires of the Neanderthals have dimmed, yes, but they were never truly extinguished. They were simply shared. The torch was passed hand to hand, breath to breath, blood to blood. And now that ancient flame burns inside of you. You are the keeper of their legacy. You are the proof that they existed. The story of the Neanderthals is not a tragedy. It is a love story that spans eons, a story of two lonely branches of the human family finding each other in the dark and weaving themselves together to face the future. They walked the earth for 400,000 years, and because of you, they are walking still. The camera of our imagination pulls back now, higher and higher, leaving the laboratory, leaving the caves, leaving the snowy steppes of the Pleistocene. We float up until the continents are just shapes in the mist, and the timeline of history becomes a single shimmering thread. The voices of the past, the click of the stones, the crackle of the fire, the soft murmur of the storytellers, fade into a gentle rhythmic hum. It is the sound of your own breathing. You are safe here, in the warmth of your own time, in the comfort of your own bed. The cold winds of the Ice Age cannot reach you now. They are just stories whispered to the dark. But know that the strength of those ancient survivors is woven into your very being. You are held by a history that is deep and strong, a lineage of resilience that has weathered every storm for 500,000 years. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension in your jaw release. The work of survival is done for today. The fire is tended, the tools are put away, and the cave is warm. You are part of an unbroken chain of life that stretches back to the first sunrise, and you have earned this rest. Drift now. Float on the river of time, back to the quiet velvet darkness where all stories begin and end. The ancestors are watching, silent and proud. You are never alone. Sweet dreams. Sweet.